Welcome to the 290 Mo podcast. I appreciate your time. If you could introduce yourself for my viewers and listeners.
My name's Ken Good. I am an attorney in Texas. I'm also a member of the board of directors for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. But I guess most importantly, I'm married and have a beautiful wife and two daughters. And my oldest is out of college, and my youngest is just finished her freshman year in college.
Okay, that's dope, man. Well, I definitely appreciate your time, man. As you probably know, with the profession that you in, time is kind of like one of the most valuable things that we have. With that being said, real quick, what made you want to get into the profession that you're in today?
Oh, okay. This is going to make me look really old, and I shouldn't admit it, but my mom and I would stay up late at night watching Perry Mason. In our area, they would have the news from 10 to 10:30, from 10:30 to 10:35, they would have Sports Extra. And then starting at 10:35, they would have Perry Mason on Sunday nights. And so my mom and I always stayed up late and watched Perry Mason together. And so I always wanted to be Perry Mason, go to law school. And I also always wanted to have a Perry Mason moment. And I was lucky enough that I actually have had a Perry Mason moment, but it doesn't happen every case. It happens probably once in a lifetime.
hmm And for the people who may be listening and watching, who don't exactly know what you mean by a Perry Mason moment, what exactly is that?
Well, a Perry Mason moment is when you have somebody on the witness stand
Mhm.
and they are presenting one story to the jury, and then you ask some questions and present maybe some evidence that they weren't aware of, and then uh, in a shocking surprise, we prove that either the facts are the exact opposite of what they were saying, or they, in a true Perry Mason moment, they're the real killer. But
Mhm.
I would say a Perry Mason moment, you've shocked the jury and disproved what they were saying and proved something the opposite. And so, like in my case, they were suing my client, I think, for rape because it was a rental house, and they were saying they could not get out of this room. They could not get out of this door that exited the building because there was an improper key that violated the law on it. It didn't have a key on the inside. But the problem is, when it came down to it, there was a bed in front of the door.
Mhm.
So did the key keep them from getting out the door, or did the bed that was in front of the door keep them from getting out the door?
Okay. Now, before we get into bail reform,
Hmm.
I want to know when you get into law early on, do you have to pick a side? Like, do you have to choose? Does it have to be something like in your heart where you choose if you're going to be with the defense or the prosecution? Is it just a part of coming up in law and you fall where the cards may? Like, how does that work? You know what I'm saying?
Probably the best example I can give you is in, my first year of law school, I was in two competitions. In law school, they limit what you can do. So there was only two competitions for first year law students, and I was in both, and I actually made it to the finals of both. But to prepare, one was an appellate argument and the other was a trial argument. You had to prepare for both sides. So to get to the finals, you would have argued both sides of the issue multiple times. And so in one of the finals, I was not successful, so I was second. And in the other finals, we won. So I would say to be successful in law school, you have to be able to argue both sides of an issue.
Hmm. Okay. Anyone that you preferred early on, or was it, what I'm saying, both equal? You just enjoyed the practice.
Well, I've always been an analytical person. I liked the appellate argument better than the trial court argument because I don't think people really have a good understanding of what happens when a case goes up on appeal. You're not retrying the case. You're pointing to the record and you're saying, Court of Appeals, look here to determine whether the trial court was correct or wrong in its ruling.
Mhm.
And so the trial court had to first rule on it. And so then there's all these issues about what's the standard of review because different standards apply to different issues. And so I always preferred issues. Now, I've really not had a lot of experience with criminal law, so I've always been civil law.
Mhm.
Bail is the one exception. Bail is governed by, it is called a criminal case in Texas, and so appeals go to the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals. And I've argued cases before the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, but they're on bail issues, not just on criminal issues. And so I I prefer legal issues, I guess is what I would say to uh well, that's my preference.
Hmm. Okay. Now let's get into the bill and bill reform.
Mhm.
Now, I'm in Illinois, and I know laws and things different from state to state, but we're in the
Sure.
first year of no cash bail. You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
before we get into that, where necessarily do you stand for the people who may be watching and listening with bail and with bail reform? What is your exact position?
I there was a judge who, I mean, there was a mayor who was on a News Nation town hall, and I think she probably stated my position better than I can. This
Mhm.
is what she said. Until you have an alternative to the private industry bail system that has the same level of accountability and the same appearance rate, because the private industry gets people to court. That's what they do, and they do it very well. Everybody else has a much worse appearance rate. So we call it failure to appears.
Mhm.
So the lowest failure to appear rate is the private industry. Everybody else is much higher. Some of them as high as 80% failure to appear rate. So, and until you have someone an alternative that has the same low failure to appear rate and the same high level of accountability, then you really don't have an alternative. And so I would say that's really my position. The things that we're trying right now and the things that you're doing right now in Illinois, especially because what you're are not alternatives because they don't even compare to the private industry. And so you're seeing all this chaos and you're seeing crime increase. And y'all have seen that for a long time in Illinois because when you say you get rid of cash bail, y'all had already gotten rid of the private industry years before that. And so what you had was this little uh, hybrid system where you're using cash bonds where people were paying it to the court and they were saying, oh, well, we're taking the middleman out. No, you're taking everybody out. The failures to appear went high and they were relying upon their failures to appear to fund their court operations. So now when they got rid of the cash bonds, they didn't replace that money with the courts for their operations. And so you're seeing even further chaos. So all the things that you've seen in Illinois that I would say that have increased crime, and I would argue have had a disproportionate impact on the Black and brown communities because more crime is being committed against them than anyone else. It's because of those actions.
Now, when you speak to these private industries, are you, to make sure I'm following you correctly, like do you mean like the bondsmen and like the bounty hunters and stuff like that? And if
Not bounty hunters because they don't post bonds. I'm talking about the private industries, a bail bondsman, who is posting a bond saying, I'm posting a bond for you, Mike, to get out of jail,
Mhm.
and I will guarantee here's his appearance in court. What's happening right now is they're being released on their promise, okay?
Mhm.
And if they don't come, they just broke their promise. Nobody's having a penalty for it. If I promise that you would go to court and if I post a $5,000 bond, if you don't go to court, then I may have to pay $5,000 to the court
Mhm.
or to the county. And so that's the big difference. We've gotten rid of all accountability, and you can see what's happening in Illinois as a result. They're having to discount crime. They're discounting punishment, giving lower sentences because they're having so many cases filed. Their backlogs are so high. Nobody's coming to court,
Mhm.
and they're trying to keep their criminal justice system from collapsing, not from making it better.
Mhm. What would you say to the people who feel like before in Illinois and as an example that even over states that still have cash bail,
Mhm.
some people say that it's a cop out if you have money. You know what I'm saying? You can do whatever you want, and as long as you have money, you can bail out. What do you say to people who raise those issues?
Well, we know that the Constitution requires that we have to have some kind of alternative. We call it different things in different places for people who are poor. And so we have alternatives for them already that doesn't require getting rid of the entire system.
Mhm.
And I would go back to until we have an alternative that has the same high level results, we don't have an alternative. And I would say that let's turn that argument completely around in a circle. And, the people that make it would be mad at me for saying it. But I would argue when you're making that argument, you're saying our Black and brown communities don't deserve public safety because we know they have a disproportionate amount of crime being committed on them. And by and large, crime is committed on the same social groups that crime is committed against. So we're saying we're going to favor the criminal over the victim. And that's what we're seeing.
With what you do, does any part of it goes into, you know what I'm saying, paying attention if like the background of the offender? Like does the background of the offender come into play, or is it just, you know what I'm saying, it's a clean slate every time a new case or a new charge is brought into play?
I've interviewed a bunch of several DAs. I'm not going to say a bunch, a couple of DAs, and they say they don't look at race when they're trying to decide whether to file a charge. But um, okay, let me do an expanded response and say the real issue there is, do we have systemic racism? And look at Illinois and then look at New Jersey. Both of those have had substantial reforms. And I promise you, the reformers were saying we're doing it because there's systemic racism. We've got to address it. Well, all these years later, you go and look at the makeup of the jails, it's the exact same. It's just now they're more dangerous people.
Mhm.
So if the makeup of the jail today is the same as before these reforms were enacted, it means one of two things. Either one, the reforms are not working, or two, more likely, they were wrong in the first place. And the makeup of the jail is not as a result of systemic racism, but because we have a disproportionate amount of crime being committed on our Black and brown communities. And that's the reason why it's important to know whether we do or we don't have systemic racism. Because if we're making these changes because of that and we don't have a problem, who's the people being hurt the most?
Mhm.
The same communities they say they're trying to help.
Mhm. Facts. That's true, and I'm pretty sure that, you know, it's 2024. We all know systemic racism is a part of the judicial system in a lot of places in America.
I don't
Um,
know if I agree with that.
and
I mean, especially in Illinois. You think about in Illinois in the inner
one of the
cities,
most
the officer
segregated
arresting
places
is black, the
in America.
judge is black, the prosecutor's black, the defendant's black. How is that systemic racism?
I'll give you the prosecutor and the judge and all that, but in the urban community, there it's all white people, man. It's all white guys, and I don't have a problem with that. I don't have a problem with that. But to say that you can't tell the difference between policing and communities in Chicago alone is that'd be is that's very inaccurate. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know if I've said I can't tell the difference, but I would say whatever we're doing right now has made the system worse
Oh yeah,
in Illinois.
for sure, fact.
And so what is it that's going on? I mean, the what you're saying is not being addressed. It's
Mhm.
actually gotten a lot worse. There's
Fact.
more crime. But the changes that have been made that we're talking about have all been made there in the name of what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And so and you think about it, we are not allowed to talk about, oh, these have all been a failure, so we're going to change what we're doing.
Right.
Oh, we're going to change to something else. No, we're not allowed to talk about that. In fact, if we do, you're called a racist.
Mhm.
Even though you're calling it like it is. Crime's increasing. What you're trying to do is not working. And so how can you say, well, we have issues with systemic racism? Well, whatever you're trying to do to address it's not working.
Mhm. For sure. I definitely agree with that 100%. I was just watching the mayor of Chicago and the police chief after 72 people shot in 72 hours, and it was just like
Wow.
a clown performance, you know what I'm saying? Because like you said, they're saying the same things, and there's no change. Before we get you up out of here, with bail, with the, I don't know if you want to say like the standards of bail, is there, should there be like any crime there's not bail permitted? Like should you not be able to bail out for murder, or do you feel like every crime should have a ticket associated with it?
I don't believe every crime should have a ticket because I think, and sometimes, people don't agree with me, but I think the biggest determining factor of whether you should get bail or get out of jail is your criminal history.
Hmm.
And so if you have just a theft charge, but you have a 20-year criminal history of theft, I think that's a different risk than a first time offender. But I do think that there are charges where the court should have the discretion to deny bail. Like in Texas, the Texas Constitution said everybody has a right to bail except for certain offenses listed in the Constitution. So capital murder is one of those that the court has the discretion to deny bail and hold you until trial. So I do believe I do believe that the court should have the discretion to deny bail for certain offenses and for certain criminal histories.
Mhm.
The problem that we get is sometimes in the name of reform, we're going to say you're just going to get a ticket for this offense. Well, when we do that, we tie the hands of the judges so they can never do anything. And that's when organized crime steps in because they're like, hey, we can make a lot of money on just committing this one offense. Look in California where they decriminalized in our urban areas theft under $950. We've got shoplifting rings. It's big business. They're making hundreds of millions of dollars, and businesses are shutting down because they can't withstand $25,000 a day in shoplifting.
Mhm.
I mean, when you tie the hands of judges, they can't address organized crime, gangs, or career criminals. And that's why I'm against just a mandatory ticket for certain offenses.
Mhm. Now, I don't know how familiar you are with states that don't do the no cash bail. What they have like I don't know, like with the pretrial, with the bond hearing, it's like a point system they go over where they kind of do
Mhm,
like
mhm.
the background, look at your and give you points to determine if you can go home or you stay. Um, how familiar are you with these processes, and do you feel like they're effective on any level? Do you think it's just a clown show? Like what's going on if you know what I'm saying? If you know what I'm saying, with these processes, if they
I,
feel like
I
they're
don't I
effective.
don't support those. I think what those are intended to do is push people to simple release. We call simple release different things in different states. Illinois right now is almost everything is simple release. You just get released on your own promise. In New York, we call it released on no bail. And then California, we call it released on zero bail. So it's all of them are just you're released on your own promise. Texas, we call it released on a personal bond. There'd
Call it
still be an amount
I
tied to
bond,
it.
Illinois.
Huh?
I
What?
bond.
High bond?
Yeah, that's what we call it in Illinois.
Oh, but you're still released on
Yeah.
just your promise.
Hmm.
And if you don't come to court, then that's just you violated your promise and your promise only. I think all of those things that you just mentioned, where this point system, it's to try to push judges to release more people and to release them more on simple release. So I don't support those because I think that the push for there's more reasons than just there's a lot of reasons why people shouldn't be released on simple release unless there's no other option. And the number one reason is the failure to appear rate. In California, all misdemeanor courts, according to the Yolo County DA, has an 80% failure to appear rate. And in Harris County, which is trying a similar system for misdemeanors, has an 80% failure to appear rate. Well, if people don't come to court 80% of the time, and Harris County, the number comes from harriscountycourtwatch.com. And so if you don't have people showing up 80% of the time, all they can do is dismiss the case eventually to keep the system from collapsing. So when you're doing that point system and you're pushing more people to simple release, that's just creating a bigger problem. The more people you have on simple release, the higher your failure to appear rate, the more chaos you have. You can't hold people accountable because your jails become more and more full of really dangerous people. And so it just creates more problems, and it's not worth it.
Hmm. Um, talk to me about some policy recommendations to balance public safety with justice reform.
Well, I think the number one thing that policymakers should require is that judges review criminal histories before they set bail or whether before they release somebody simply. Uh, because I mean, criminal history is the greatest barometer of whether people will commit crime again. And it's kind of interesting, there's a study out of New Jersey where they're saying this study does not show that bail reform decreased crime, but it doesn't show that it increased crime. So it had no impact whatsoever. But then they make this argument, well, there's all these criticisms of risk assessments because they have racial biases. And that's one of the reasons why I don't like them. But they take into consideration, I mean, they think they're harsher on our minority communities because it looks at your criminal history. I don't look at criminal history as a racial thing. If you've got a long criminal history, that should be considered in whether you'll have pretrial release or whether you'll have simple release or a bail bond. Because if you have a criminal history or substantial criminal history, your chances of running or your chances of committing a new crime while your case is pending increases substantially.
Hmm. outside of race, outside of the systemic racism, black, brown, white, green, whatever, outside of just black and white, clear as day, up, down, left, right, is the justice system fair?
Um, I think we can always improve the criminal justice system, but I think our criminal justice system is the fairest criminal justice system in the world compared to any other system. So we should always look to ways to improve it. We always have things that we don't agree with juries, but by and large, I think we get it right. Uh, and I think what we have to understand, what we're not doing, the biggest problem we have right now is when the jury comes back and they issue a verdict, someone attacks it. And it's always because of some reason, whether it's racism or some reason, we just don't disagree. We don't agree with it. So we're always undermining the criminal justice system. That's probably our biggest problem. Whenever a jury comes back, we should always be circling the wagons around the system. The
Mhm,
system has spoken, and until we prove that something improper happened, we should be circling the wagons to say the system has broken. We have faith in the system.
mhm,
And I don't think we do that. In fact, I think we're doing the opposite of that right now. And that's creating problems. It's undermining credibility. It's undermining public support of the criminal justice system. And I think that's part of the plan. I think that's part of what's going on is to push the public to always question the government.
mhm. Um, if you don't mind, before you go, if I can get your opinion on some other things that's going on with your state.
Okay.
Border control, you know what I'm saying? Biden just released some policies on that. Is that something real big? Is that a real issue with the state? Is it a political move? Is it, you know what I'm saying, for us that's up in Illinois, you know what I'm saying, we was getting bus loads from Texas. Is it a political thing? Is it a real issue in Texas? What's the play, you know what I'm saying, for somebody who's
No,
at.
it's a real issue, and I'll say it's a real issue because President Biden, how many months? This is June, July, August, September, October, November. So 4.5 months before the election, is issuing executive orders on a subject that has said in the past that does not have the power to issue executive orders, and that's up to the legislature. So he thinks it is a huge issue that will impact his election unless he does something. Uh, Border security in Texas is a big issue. We're spending billions of dollars to do what the federal government is not doing. And as you pointed out, we're even shipping people to other states because we don't have the resources to to cripple our state to take care of them. And so since the government won't do its job, or the governor is shipping people to other states to highlight the fact that we're nothing's being done to help Texas.
Mhm,
Um, Texas keeps losing in the courts on whose job is it to enforce immigration laws. I would argue the immigration policy is very similar to the bail reform policy. The actions being taken by the government are very similar. We want to be softer on crime. We want to be softer on immigrants, and and as a result, we're seeing crime go up. We're seeing our population explode in ways that we can't handle with our current structure. And so you're seeing the public respond to that. And I don't think, one of the things we're hearing in the criminal justice world is, well, crime is really not up. It's just the perception that crime is up, and crime's really not up. And so believe us. Same thing with immigration. I mean, immigration is not a problem. It's just a right wing talking point. Those two issues are very similar. And I think those arguments on by one side have worked in the past. I don't think they'll work this time, and that's the reason why you're seeing the president issue executive orders, which he claimed 4 months before the election, which he claimed he did not have the power to do 6 months a year ago.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. So before you go, man, if you could just explain where the passion comes for what you do today. A little bit earlier, I asked you why you got into law altogether. Today, what you stand for, is a big topic, a real deal, a real big deal in the country. What makes you want to stand next to this cause and fight for it?
I think part of it is I have an appellate mindset from looking at issues, but I got a call from a friend saying, "Hey, there's a hearing in this case called O'Donnell versus Harris County, which was one of the early cases,
Mhm.
and they're having a hearing today. Would you go down and just listen to the argument?" And I went, and I was shocked. I thought the judge was wrong in her analysis. I thought she was going down the wrong road, and I thought that we were going to have a debacle. And so I came out of the hearing, and I was calling my friends, and I was calling clients to say, "This is terrible, and we've got to get involved in this." And I think over time I've been proven right because she issued rulings. It has had a huge impact on this debate nationwide. Her case was cited by many judges, but the problem is it's now been reversed 7 or 8 times, or even more than that.
Mhm.
The most recent ruling from the Fifth Circuit was that the case should have never been filed in federal court.
Mhm.
And so I've been proven right on that, but we're still suffering the ramifications of her initial ruling and is wrong and it being so wrong.
Oh man, well, this is definitely a informational interview. I appreciate your time. Before you go, man, if you could let the people know where they could possibly reach out to you, where they could have you guest on their show, all that good information.
Sure. If people want more information about me or our organization, they can go to pbtx.com, which is our website for the Professional Bondsmen of Texas. We have a blog on there where we highlight important criminal justice news. We also have our own podcast, which is called The Bell Post. You can find it, there's a link to it on our website, but you can also go to thebellpost.com. All we do there is talk about criminal justice issues. If you want to know what the New Jersey plan is, we have an episode on what the New Jersey plan is. We have an episode on New Jersey, I mean, on Illinois when it passed the CARE Act. And we talked about what was going to happen when that happened. And so I would say we've been proven right as well there. And so those are probably the best places to get a hold of me, or they can contact our PR team through them. And we'll be happy. I mean, I'm happy to have discussions with anybody. As you can tell, I'm passionate.
Mhm.
I can tell you why I say these things and why I think it's bad what we're doing. And I think it's bad on our minority communities. And I think we've been sold a bill of goods in these areas. And we're seeing people pull back. New York has rolled back their reforms 4 times now, and they're going to continue to roll it back because crime is still increasing. And that's going to happen. That's going to continue because crime is increasing because of these soft on crime policies.
Mhm. For sure. I anticipate to see a rollback in Illinois as well because it's been off the chain and the summer ain't even started for real yet. So, like I said, I appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I look forward to working with you in the future. In a minute, gang.